And first to speak is Deputy Pauline Tully.
Good afternoon, Adam. And can I first say I want to commend you and AsIAm for all the work you do in supporting autistic people and their families. And I know you support a lot of other smaller organisations that were established, parents groups and so forth, who come together to try and support each other, and you provide support and training for them. And I think you do an awful lot of work in creating the awareness that you're talking about that needs to be improved, but you're already doing so much of that. I think your report is very comprehensive, as the Chairman has said, and you've given us a lot of stark and frightening statistics, but as well as some very good recommendations for going forward. Because the positive, I suppose, are that this committee has been established, that there is an autism strategy being worked on, but as you say yourself, unless something actually comes out of those, there'll be no more than talking shops. And we've seen before reports being produced which were excellent but never implemented, and just sat on a range of issues just gathering dust on the shelf. I suppose you mentioned there that awareness is at 80%, which is good, but understanding is only 40%. So how do you visualise improving that, I suppose? Because I know we often talk about improved training for teachers, maybe for those in the childcare settings, for those in further education, but it actually needs to extend to all people. It needs to extend to every employer in the state. I mean, I had one parent tell me about her son who had qualified, I think he had a master's in IT, and she was talking to an employer and they were very interested in him, and then when she said he's autistic, suddenly the interest waned. And that's pure misunderstanding of autism, I think, in a lot of ways, or some ways maybe not knowing enough about it and what it might mean and what supports it have to provide. So maybe it's education that's needed as well. Also, I suppose we're talking about schools and the lack of appropriate school places. Again, one parent contacted me on Friday. She thought she was getting ahead of the posse by looking for a place for her son in a special class for September 12 months, only to be told by all the places in the surrounding area there's nowhere. Like, he's in a mainstream primary school at the moment with support, and she's been recommended by an EPS psychologist that he needs a special setting, special class setting. And I said to her, well, what did your CNO say or suggest? Nothing. We don't have a CNO. There's no CNO in place, or if there is, we've never had any contact. So that's kind of concerning as well. Now, I will be contacting the NCSE to talk about that case, but I'm just wondering as well, do you have, and your organisation, have much interaction with the NCSE on the issue of creating sufficient school places? And I suppose from listening to the Minister here earlier as well, are you confident that the change she talked about, particularly in relation to the CDNTs, will happen and will happen quick enough to make a huge difference, because early intervention is so important? Thank you.
Indeed, we do work with a lot of groups around the country, and we've just recently finished the Bridge Forward programme with Cavan Autism Parent Support Group, which I know is a very good group in your own constituency. In terms of training, I think what we need, there is international examples that the committee can look to that I think will make a big difference. If we look, for example, at legislation that's just been passed through Westminster that now will mandate all NHS staff in the UK to have autism training, and that actually arose out of a tragic incident in the UK in which an autistic person was misdiagnosed, didn't receive the treatment that they needed because there wasn't that understanding of some of the communication differences, for example. So, this training does actually save lives. It is absolutely critical. I know, for example, in Northern Ireland, there was an initiative a couple of years ago in which I think using lotto funding, every member of the PSNI at the time was able to access training. So I do think mandatory training is absolutely critical. I also think, though, there's the training that you need that's bespoke to specific industries. Then I think there's the other bit that you need, which is, I suppose, in Ireland, we're not always good at talking about these things, and if it's in any way uncomfortable, we shy away from it. And I think we've seen that in lots of social issues. So if we just even think about school, we've moved people into mainstream. 86% of autistic people attend mainstream. We've done it in a very Irish way, which is we haven't really talked about it, and we have people sitting in classes across the country who are autistic, whose peers really don't understand. So I think we need to have very targeted awareness campaigns across the education system. Young people get this when they're given the information that they need, but I think what people need is beyond just actually the positive openness to it, which young people have already, but actually the tools for what you should do, how you can make a friend, how you can help somebody if they become overwhelmed. So I would like to see awareness campaigns targeting the general population, and then targeted mandatory training, particularly for public services. In terms of the issue around education, I suppose to say at the outset, we've had very good engagement in recent weeks with the new CEO of the NCSE. and he's undertaken to meet with our organisation once a month moving forward, so we can keep him informed of trends on the ground, and I think that will be helpful. What I think is very clear is the role of a CNO as maybe envisaged or in the spirit of the Epson Act versus what it is in practice. There seems to be a disconnect. I think in many respects for families it can feel like a purely bureaucratic task as opposed to actually someone who's holding your hand and working with the family. So we really do think there needs to be more CNOs in the NCSE. There's actually been a reduction since its establishment and the need has grown massively. What I would like to see is a streamlining of the process to support families as well. There's nothing more soul destroying than having to apply for 20 schools. Sometimes even when it's clear there won't be a place in one at the time you're given the list by the NCSE. So there needs to be some streamlining piece of work that it does need to urgently be done. And I suppose linked to that, I think there needs to be a piece of work around making sure that if a child accepts a place, that if that place then isn't appropriate, that they're still on the NCSE's books. We see a lot of children take the mainstream class pace and then drop off the system. But often they're the children who the school placement doesn't work for or begins to break down. In terms of the CDNT, this is an area that's incredibly frustrating for families, and right across the country it doesn't seem to be working at all at present. One thing that I would point out, I think, where we need to go to in terms of improving access to therapies is returning to the Disability Act. We saw how quickly the change to assessment and need could come in once the High Court ruled. And I think as a result, we need to move to a place where therapies are rights-based as well and not just grace and favour.